Let's see. And while I'm in here, let me go ahead and go to lecture materials over here on the side. And under lecture materials, you'll see that there is the syllabus posted. And that's what I'll be going through with you right now. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that so I can be showing you on the screen as we go through some of these different things. So I may have lost those first couple of minutes. So I'll just say that those who are in hybrid, this is your primary way of getting the material. The lectures are recorded from previous semesters. So once you're in Blackboard, go over here where it says YouTube lecture links. And by clicking on that, it would help if I'm in the right semester, right? Sorry about that. Computer seems to have come to a complete stop here. I'm in the wrong semester. I'm in the wrong year. It's okay. There we go. So over here on the side, you'll see YouTube lecture links. If you click on that, you're going to see that I have put together already from winter of 2015, last fall, and last summer's lectures, okay? And I'll have another folder here starting this evening that says summer 2015. And the lectures have not changed significantly over the last year, so you can, with confidence, go into any of these, and it will bring you to, for example, just open this up, and you'll see that it says Lecture 1, Lecture 2, Lecture 3, and all you do is drag and copy this address, stick it into your browser, and it will bring you to YouTube, and then you'll be able to listen to those lectures. And so that's there for you in previous semesters as well as the ones that I'm recording now and putting online for you this evening. If you're listening to a previous semester, keep in mind the dates may be a little different, the comments about exam dates, things like that, but the content will be the same. And if you listen to the one tonight, then of course everything will be specific, date specific to this semester. So let me go back to the syllabus and we'll walk through the syllabus together here. Again, it's important I'm in the right semester, right? Okay, so this is a combined course, Biology 105. L and L means lecture and lab are combined, which means your grade will be one grade for lecture and lab things combined. The breakdown I'll go over with you in a moment. The lectures are in this room, 1304. Labs are just a couple of doors down in 1312. And this is temporary housing for us. This is where I normally lecture from, but the labs this summer are temporary as we prepare to move into the new building in the fall. So our old building, our old area is being renovated for the new programs that will be there. And in the meanwhile, we're just here in this area of the Stevenson Center. So we're very close to each other from lab and lecture. My office is upstairs. It's the last room before you go into the new building. If you've seen where the new building wing is going to be for the Science Center, our offices are permanently located just before you go into that new area. It's off limits right now, but that's a room 1118, and I'm in Suite D. There is what do I have on here? Office hours, 11:45 to 12. So I get on campus before noon. I have labs at noon. Labs go from noon to 3:45. Lecture goes from 4 to 6:10. Evening lab goes from 6:15 to 10. So I'm pretty much hanging out here, right, for about 12-hour days, 10-hour days. So I'm here Monday through Thursday. The best time to catch me is actually when I'm in action. So find me in a lab. Both labs are just down here for 105 and 106, the second semester course. And this is the best place to find me. My office upstairs, I'm always down here. So you're not going to find me up there very often. I do check my email as often as I can during labs during the day. Email is by far the best way to reach me. The phone number here is for my secretary. I have an office phone I haven't checked in about 6.5 years. So I'm just never there. I don't even know how to check my voicemail. So it just blinks. And it's been doing that for many, many years. So just don't call me, email me. That's the way to reach me, and I'll respond to you usually very quickly. Course description, Anatomy and physiology. This is the 2-semester sequence. I know this is an expensive start, right? Tuition's bad enough, much less the books. But keep in mind the books you will be using for 2 semesters. So the Martini textbook and the mastering and the lab atlas and all of the things you're buying will be used for both semesters. So it's really a 2-semester investment. It's also one of those books that you'll likely keep on your shelf. Unlike maybe the World War history through Stalin or whatever, right? You may not keep that book on your shelf all the rest of your life unless you're a history buff. This is a book you're going to keep on your shelf as you build your own personal library. So it is an investment, but it's an investment in most of your futures. This is 4 credit hours. If you were to transfer this to Western or someplace else, it counts as 4 credit hours. We do things here by contact hours, 6 contacts. There are no prerequisites that are required. However, if you've had chemistry or had medical terminology or had biology recently, then you will find that that information will help you, but it's not at all required. There will be dissection of fetal pigs and some other organs in the lab. Let's go over required materials. Again, I know this is a sticker shock when you're up in the bookstore. So the Martini textbook. Anybody have that just to show it? It's the blue-covered Visual Anatomy and Physiology 2 book. With that, in the bookstore, comes a mastering A&P code. It's very, very important. It's not just an optional study thing. There will be online quizzes, online homework, online lab assignments, an online test at one point. This is not optional. There's a lot of things you must do through mastering. That mastering A&P code is good for 24 months, so it's good for 2 years. And you'll use it for 106, and if you take a semester off or whatever, it'll still be valid in the future. So you want to make sure you hold on to that. Once you register, you don't have to hold on to the code. You'll simply register in future semesters through your username and password that you're establishing now. So you'll be able to use it again for 106 when that time comes. Also in there is a student workbook. You'll also be turning in some of these pages with your labs. It's a small, looks like the book, it's paperback. Something you'll want to keep in a close place. You don't have to bring it to lecture. You don't have to bring it to lab. But you will see as we move through it that there are some pages from that that you will tear out and include in your lab. It's also a great little study tool. Now, I'll be the first person to say there's no shortage of study tools in anatomy and physiology. This is a huge area. Nationally, publishers, right? Hundreds of thousands of students take anatomy and physiology every year. And as such, the publishers are competing for business, and they have created beautiful online resources to help you as students and to make our life as professors easier as well. So there's no shortage of things for you to do, and I'll show you some of those study areas and online resources for you. That may not be the course when you get to Calculus 5 or 3 or something, but for A&P, huge market, lots and lots of resources for you online, and that's really nice. So you've got, in that packet, you've got your book, you've got your mastering code, you've got the workbook, and there was an atlas in there, okay? And that's a Hebert atlas. I'm really kind of psyched by this atlas. It just came out last semester. And when you look at that lab atlas, which I want you to bring to lab, get in the habit of bringing it, it has cadaver images right next to anatomical model images. So you've got the best of both worlds side by side, and it's really quite nice. So I think you'll enjoy that atlas. We probably won't use it in weeks 1 or 2, but starting in week 3, you'll definitely be looking at your atlas. So get in the habit of bringing that to lab as well. So that's all sitting there in your Amerman packet, okay? When you're registering for mastering, I sent you that Blackboard announcement about that, and you'll go through Blackboard, and I'll show you how to do that if you're still struggling with that. We'll deal with that right after class. There's also in the lab, or in the bookstore, a lab packet. That is the Amerman Lab Manual. And that's a big 3-hole punched, thick, colored, 8.5 by 11 book. And then below that was a fetal pig book. And you'll want to bring that fetal pig book to lab starting in about 6 weeks. The rest of it you'll want to bring week to week. So you've got a lot of stuff. And I'll talk to you in lab about how to get organized and how to manage all this material. As far as coming to lecture, most of you in this room probably have lab this afternoon or have lab this evening. The hybrid students have lab on Wednesday afternoon. So I'm imagining, anybody here hybrid? Okay, so most of you have lab today. So you're going to have your stuff with you. So that's fine. Bring it with you to lecture, no problem. But you're not required. Okay, if you were coming in on a Wednesday, you don't have to bring all your lab stuff to lecture. You don't have to bring your book here unless you want to on Wednesdays. And on Mondays, you're going to have it with you anyway. Okay, what else do we have here? There's also 2 supplements. There's a yellow covered lab supplement, and there's the blue covered lecture supplement. You'll want to bring that lecture supplement to lecture every single time. You'll want to bring the lab supplement to lab every single time. So that is something you will definitely carry with you. They're not too big, and that's a non-negotiable. You'll want to have that with you. You'll also want to get in the bookstore 6 Scantron answer sheet forms. These are a specific form 884-E. I'm the only person on campus who uses this particular form. It is an 8.5 by 11 size, double-sided green form. It is not the half piece of paper that you'll see some Scantron forms, and it's not orange. So there's a bunch of different forms on campus. I'm the only guy who uses it. You may have to ask in the bookstore. I think there are some in the back, but likely as you're checking out, say, hey, I need 6 forms for Dr. Mack, and they will give those to you. They're very inexpensive. When you get them, please make sure you put them in a safe place where they're flat and not going to get wet and mangled. If they're all mangled, they're not of any use to you or to me. When it comes time to lab, we'll go through the lab-specific things. But that's what you need for lecture. Any questions on resources? Things for the bookstore? Any shortages that I'm not aware of? Everything's in the bookstore? Everything's good? Okay. Let's keep going through this then. So how are you going to get your grade? There are going to be 6 exams throughout the semester. We'll look at the calendar together in a moment. 5 of them are regular old lecture exams. They're each going to count for 75 points. Okay, there's 1,000 points in the course altogether. So each exam is about 7.5% of your overall grade. The final exam, which will be slightly cumulative, about 25% of the final exam will be cumulative, and that'll be worth a few more points. That'll be worth 100. Okay. For each exam, there will also be an online quiz worth 10 points. So between the quiz and the exam, right, we're talking about roughly 10% of your grade going in for each of these exams. Those quizzes will be through mastering. There will be a take-home exam. This is completely separate and beyond anything we're doing here together in lecture. In fact, there just isn't enough time. So the take-home exam will be over a couple of systems and a couple of lectures that I won't be giving to you directly. It's an open book, open resource exam. People do really well on it. I don't call it bonus, but you should do very well on that exam. There is a diagnostic quiz. Okay, now there's 2 things. There's usually only one for Biology 105. You guys have double duty this semester. You've seen my emails if you've seen the announcements. There are 2 things you guys need to take care of this week. One is, quote, the diagnostic quiz. This is a tool called My Readiness Test. It is separate from Blackboard. It is separate from mastering. I gave you the access and the email to go to, and this is something you'll do before the end of the week. It should take you less than an hour. It's basically a diagnostic, lets me know where you are. And next week I'll actually be in San Antonio at the Human Anatomy and Physiology Society meeting, sharing with the national audience how I've been using this data in my readiness test. So it's something I've been using for the last couple of years. I value it. I hope that you'll do your best on it. You will not be graded on the accuracy, but simply for having completed the test. Okay? So do the very best you can. Don't blow it off. Please do it seriously. But you're not going to be, getting less than perfect score as long as you do that test and complete it for me. So that is one thing. I'll give you 5 points for doing that. There's also this semester, for just you guys this semester, a Madison assessment test. This is a nationally normed scientific literacy exam. There's a pre-test and a post-test. This week you take the pre-test. At the end of the semester, you will then again take the post-test. The My Readiness Test that I talked about just a moment ago is something you do on your own computer in the next week. The Madison test is only offered through our testing center here on campus. So you'll make an appointment, as the announcement said. There's all kinds of times available. It takes about 45 minutes, plan an hour, but 45 minutes. And you'll go in, they'll get you set up, you'll sit in front of the computer, you'll take this little pre-test. Same idea, do the very best you can. That same exact test will be given to you at the end of the semester as a post-test. We use that data for national accreditation. So it just assures that our students are doing well, they're making the improvements that we expect. It's just one of those things we all have to live through. Thank you in advance for doing that. I know it's an extra few minutes of your time, but that's something else you should plan on getting done this week. I think that window's open a little bit longer. We had this week and next week for the Madison test. But just get it over with, right? Because what happens when we procrastinate, things go wrong. So try to get it done, just get it done, and that way, if something does go wrong, you've got next week to make it up, rather than anticipating next week and then something goes wrong and you don't get it done. So please just go ahead and make that appointment. It tells you how to do it. Go to the testing center, click on whatever it says, show up for your scheduled appointment. Maybe you can do that on Wednesday right before or after lecture or something. Okay, so that's the diagnostic quiz and the Madison assessment. Again, I'll give you 5 points for having done those. Then there will be a short research paper. The short research paper is not, it sounds really scary, right? It is kind of short. It's only 4 paragraphs long. It'll be over a topic of your choice. I'll tell you a lot more about that as we get closer to that time. It's not due about halfway through the course. So more about that later. That's worth 50 points. Then all of these assignments that you're doing on mastering will be worth 35 points at the end of the semester. Here's the golden rule, and I'll tell you more about this. But on the mastering assignments, there are homework assignments, and I'll show this to you in a moment. There are some different activities that you'll be doing on those. As long as you earn 80% of all of the available points assigned in mastering, you will get all 35 points. So I'm not looking for perfection. I'm simply looking at it as a tool for your learning. And I will tell you now, there's a very, very strong correlation between the students who spend time in mastering and do the work and their overall success in the course. So students who spend the time doing the homework do very, very well. They do better in the course, and they get those 35 points. Students who don't do it very consistently, not only are they not as prepared for the exams, but then they lose points at the end of the semester because I can't give them all 35 points. So your goal is to do all the online assignments and to get at least 80%. Right? If you get less or miss one, it's not the end of the world. Just make up for it in the next couple of assignments. So if you miss one, miss a deadline, it's okay. You're not looking for perfection, but looking for 80% average across the board on all of these online activities. So that's 35 points. There are in lab, getting to lab now, there's 11 lab quizzes throughout the semester. I'll tell you more about those in lab. They're each worth 5 points. There are some pre-lab assignments. There are 2 PAL assignments. Again, they're on mastering. They're each worth 10 points. And then finally, there are 2 lab exams that I'll tell you more about in lab. So a total of 1,000 points. Okay, so it's a lot of points. It's a lot of assignments. And everything's important. I know that one little pre-lab here, one little quiz there, not doing well on it, that's okay. But you don't want to make a history of missing some of these things because over time, 10 points, 10 points, 10 points, 10 points starts to add up and make a big impact on your grade. So if you make a few mistakes here and there, don't do very well in a quiz, it's not the end of the world. There's 1,000 points. But you don't want to make a history of doing poorly. So down below in the little fine print are the dates and more specific things. I've even got in there under number 4 the code and the program ID you need for that My Readiness test. Just take a look at this. Compare it up against your master calendar. I definitely encourage you to get out a calendar and write down all the test dates and things that I'll be showing you here in a moment. Okay, so that's the how am I going to get my grade section. Now let's take a look. Here's the grading scale. The number one thing that everyone asks, well, what grade do I need? Minimally, 720 points. Right? So a C is 72%. And a C is what's required to transfer back to a home institution or to transfer out of here at some point. And a C is what's required of the nursing or respiratory therapy programs to move on to Biology 106. So that's the minimum, 720 points, C. Okay? Now, that shouldn't be your goal, but that is the minimum to move on to the next level. So just keep that in mind, and I'll keep giving you updates on your grades throughout the semester. Any questions right now on just the syllabus, on how you're going to get your points, on what you need out of the bookstore, anything like that? Okay. Turn to a couple of folks you don't know, and the next couple of blanks, just get a couple more names. Grab some classmates. If you've already had lab today and you've already got their names, grab a couple more friends. Telephones and emails. If there's a time of the day you don't want to be bothered, write that down as well. The rest of the syllabus, much of it is the same standard language you'll see in all of the MCC syllabi. It's very common language about our accreditation status and how to check your email, things like that. I do want to just say to those who are in the hybrid section, I'll go over the calendar in a moment. Those who are in the room right now, you'll take your exams during our regularly scheduled time at 4 o'clock. The people who are in the hybrid section will take their exams in the testing center. Now, I don't know the testing center hours for the summer yet, and it could be that they're going to be taking it on the same day. So if the exam's on Monday, they'll be scheduling it in the testing center on Monday, or they may just be joining us here. And the same thing if the exam's on a Wednesday, they may be joining us here or taking it earlier in the day in the testing center. That's really the only difference between being hybrid and being traditional. Nothing else changes. It's simply the flexibility of not feeling the necessity to come to lecture. Many of you may become hybrid. Not that you'll take the exams in the testing center, but you may decide that you do just as well listening to the lectures at home. It's your choice. I'm not going to be taking attendance in lecture. I love to see you here. I want to see you here. Many students really do better by being here. But just know that if you do miss a lecture, it's not the end of the world. It will be posted. It will be available to you to listen to. And that can be a nice option. Okay? So I hope that you'll be here. But just know that if you're not, you'll have this lecture as a backup. So let me just go through a few things about lab. I'll go through lab things in class. I do want to tell you, though, we do have typically a biology resource room, a dedicated space where walk-in tutors and models are available to you. Because this summer we're in transition, we don't have a dedicated space. But we will have biology resources in the labs, between the two labs. Whatever lab's not in session, the room across the way will be where models and other resources are for you. That's a place where you can come and study, hang out, look at models, look at microscopes. We'll have all that available for you. By the end of probably today or tomorrow, I'll be posting when the walk-in tutoring hours will be available to you. So there'll be student tutors who are being paid to sit there, wait for you to come and talk to them. And I encourage you to take advantage of that. There will also be the opportunity for one-on-one tutoring. So if those times that we have tutors waiting for you don't work for your personal schedule, you can simply call the tutoring center and request a tutor. In fact, one of the guys may walk in here in a moment and give us a little spiel about that. But there is one-on-one tutoring available for you, and you can just go over to room 204 in the tutoring center or go to My MCC and look up tutoring center and make an appointment to get a tutor. If you think that's something you would want to have, or history tells you that that's something you will benefit from, then please make that appointment now. It takes usually a few days for that to get set up, and if you wait till the night before the exam or the day before the exam, it's not going to happen. So go ahead, and if you anticipate wanting tutoring, either by yourself or in a small group, please contact them and get that going now. The rest of this, again, is that standard language about dispute resolutions and intervention teams and how to check your Blackboard. I'll let you look through that on your own. I will just read through a few things about lecture. I do hope that you'll come. And if you are not coming, if you're in hybrid, I don't want you to wait to the night before the exam to start listening to lectures, right? Don't get behind. That's the number one problem, is that students get behind. And so if you're not coming to lecture, I assume that you're listening to the lecture within the next 24 hours or that evening. There's a lot of material. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that our body isn't quite complex. And depending upon your background and your ability to synthesize a lot of information, some of you will say, okay, this isn't so bad. Some of you will feel a little bit overwhelmed by the amount of material going on in lecture and lab. So again, if you feel like this is going too fast, too much material, definitely grab a tutor, grab me during my office hours. Let's figure out how to help you be successful. Exams will be taken here in class. Again, you'll need that 884-E form for that. And the exams are largely multiple choice, but there will be a little bit of short answer. There'll be some vocab. There'll be some labeling of structures, and I'll go over more of that as we get closer to the first exam. There will be Oh, what else do I want to tell you here? I think the rest of this we'll go over as we get closer to the exams. You can just read through this. Now, as far as attendance goes, attendance at labs is absolutely required. Again, I'm not going to be taking attendance here in lecture. If you have any sort of documented disability that has in the past allowed you to get extra time or some sort of accommodation, please know that I'll work with the office as much as I can, but I am not allowed to make any special accommodations for you. You'll have to go through the office. So room 101 is where our special services office is, and if you have any hearing issues or dyslexia or anything like that that in the past has got you've been able to get special services for, please don't hesitate to contact them. They'll contact me. They won't tell me anything. They'll just say, John gets extra time or whatever it is, and that'll all be done very discreetly. Okay, so how are you going to do well in this course? Come, listen, stay tuned. Don't check out on me. Come to class, read through the book, stay organized, all of these things. These are just all the things that students do. Let's take a look at the calendar, okay? So we're over here on the last page or so. This has the lecture material and the lab material on the same calendar. You'll get a separate syllabus in lab just to help you stay organized, but this has everything in one place. So let me help you understand this document. So here we are. It's Monday, the 18th, Introduction to the Human Body and Organ and Body Organization. We're in the Martini textbook, chapters 1 and 2. We'll get to a little bit of 2, I think, today. Next time, on Wednesday, we'll be starting or finishing up or continuing our conversation on chemistry of life. That's chapter 2. Next Monday, there is a holiday, so there is no lecture next week. In fact, there's no lab next week at all. I'll tell you more about that in lab when we get there, but there's no lab next week. There's going to be some online activities to keep you busy. For Monday students, you'll simply do it sometime during the week. Wednesday students, again, no lab. We'll just do some online activities. Look for an email from me and more information in lab about that. This week in lab, here we are, right? We're doing lab 1. That's units 1 and 3 from the Ammerman book, and that's covering anatomical directions and microscopy. So that's kind of reading through the schedule. If we look through at the highlighted things, your first exam will be Wednesday, June 3rd. Okay? Wednesday, June 3rd, that exam will include chapters 1 and 2, as well as vocab 1 through 20. I'll tell you more about that, what that means in a few minutes. It's also going to include the material that you learned in Lab 1. So it's going to be chapters 1 and 2 from lecture and material from Lab 1. And I'll prep you for that as we get closer to that exam. So that'll be in here on Wednesday, June the 3rd. If you're in SO1 or SO2, regular sections, you'll take the exam here. It's all we'll do that period. So we'll get here at 4, we'll take the exam. When the exam's done, we're out of here. They're usually designed to take about an hour and a half. So you're going to have some extra time for those during the exam. Time will not be an issue for anyone during the summer months with the longer period of time for the lectures. Those students who are in hybrid will make an appointment with the testing center to take it on Wednesday, June 3rd. So going through exam 2, right, and just look at these major dates. So please get out your major calendar, your class calendar, and make a note of all these exam dates. I have rarely changed test dates. I've been doing this long enough that I know where I'll be on what day and at what hour. And so with that reason, I rarely, unless there's some sort of emergency, have changed test dates. So you know that these are firm. If we go all the way down, we'll see that the final exam will be on Wednesday, August 5. So please don't email me in July and say, I didn't know when the final was, and I've already made tickets for Hawaii. Okay? The exam will be on Wednesday, August 5. That'll be our final exam, our final day together. 2 days before that, on 8/3 will be our lab exam. So that last week, there's a lab exam on Monday, and there's a lecture exam on Wednesday. That's the only time, I think, where there is 2 exams in the same week. Okay, if I go back and look at this, let me confirm that. Yes. So as you look at this, what you're going to see, for example, looking up and down this calendar, so this gives you lab and lecture combined. This week there's a lecture exam, lecture exam, lab exam, lecture exam. So there's going to be something almost every week, to be honest. There's going to be something going on pretty significant week after week. In the summer, we have 12 weeks. In the winter, we have 14 weeks. So the course is 2 weeks shorter. It's not going to feel rushed. It's not going to feel different, I don't think. But they add on a little bit of time to each of my lectures. That's why our lectures go to 6:10. And they add on to each of our labs a little bit. That's why they're 3 hours and 45 minutes long rather than 3 hours. But we're still doing the same amount of material. I'll try to give you a little break in a little while in the middle of the lecture, and we'll go to about 6:10, and then lab in the evening we'll start at 6:15 just down the hallway. Also, just as a note, it's a long day, right? If you're coming in from lab from noon to 6:10, that's a long day. If you're coming in at 4 for lecture and staying till 10, that's a long day. There is no food service this summer. The bistro's closed down. The only food available to you is the junk food in the bookstore or what you bring in yourself. And you're welcome to eat as long as it's not disturbing in the lecture. So if you need to have that little snack bar, that little something with you, just make sure you have it with you. There is only vending machines on campus and the bookstore, but no bistro, no halfway decent food. Okay, any questions related to the syllabus, the dates or whatnot? Anything at all? Take a look at it, put this thing in a safe place, read through it, refer to it often. I'll try to keep you on schedule. I don't think there'll be any problems keeping up with the syllabus. Any questions at all? Okay, while I'm got your attention up here on the screen, before I get into my lectures, let me just go to my PowerPoint. So if you want to grab your blue covered lecture supplement, let's take a look at this. And I'll start walking through this and then I'll back up a little bit, but I'll use these PowerPoint notes as a cue to get through all the material here. So as you open this document up, the very first page, you come to what's called Darley's Tips for Success in a Biology Class or something like that. What's that called?
That's it.
Something like that, right? Study Suggestions for Introductory Biology Courses. This is a document that I ripped off the internet. The last name I found associated with it is Darley, somewhere from the University of Georgia. I don't know if it's original source or not. It's a nice little page. It's only front and back. It's very short, very easy to read. And a lot of students come to me saying, I'm really not sure how to be successful in this course. They hear all sorts of nightmares and horror stories. And, we're busy and we want to do well. And maybe it's been a couple years since you've taken a biology course and you're not quite sure how to approach it. Yes?
Is this supposed to be the page titled Study Suggestions?
Yes. Yeah, the very first thing in your package. And just read through this front and back. On the back side, at the bottom, I have, I think, 2 little blanks for you to write down what you might do having read this. Okay? So read through this. This article, I'm not going to read it to you. It's about active versus passive learning. And it's just some recommendations about how students learn, some suggestions on what to do and perhaps some things not to do as you approach this course this semester. So read through this. Ask yourself what's maybe 1 or 2 things you learned from it or 1 or 2 things you might do differently having read through this little paper, and start off the semester really well. Other question? Okay. So just a couple of reminders to me. Make sure you've got your textbook, your lab manual. I think Blackboard announcements have gotten everybody up to speed on this. And let's just take a look at this. Oops, this is my wrong slide. I didn't update this. I think you have the updated one. I don't have the updated one. Let me get that for you. Okay, here are the pictures I'm looking for right here. So what you're going to find is that this is your textbook, right, the big blue book, Visual A&P. I like the book. It's, as it says, very visual. There's not long paragraphs of reading. It's sort of almost like a table, coffee table kind of book. And everything's in little tiny segments, just enough information to make sense of everything. So I think you'll enjoy using the book. Then with the book, there was PAL. 3.0, and I'll show you that today and in the lab. And then there was also an atlas. Now, the atlas has been updated from this one. You have a black-covered atlas, and that's the one that has the cadaver images and the model images side by side. And in this also came the mastering code. And then there was the Amerman book and the fetal pig book. If you want to get to, you can also go to masteringAMP.com, and that will also get you to get to mastering. So you can go through Blackboard, or you can just go to masteringAMP.com, and that will also have you register and get onto into mastering. Just a little bit about myself. I live in Grand Rapids, so I have the commute over here every day. I have 5 children, and so I stay very, very busy. I have a daughter who finished up the nursing program here last year. She's now a nurse at Helen DeVos Children's Hospital in the NICU unit. She also spends some weekends doing PRN work at the mental health hospital at Pine Rest. So she's very, very busy, and so I know all about the nursing program here. And if you have any questions about that, I'm not the official person, but having been through with my daughter, I know a lot about it. I have a second daughter who is a junior at Grand Valley. She's doing an internship at Van Andel Institute this summer in Parkinson's, and she's a pre-med student and heading off to Ghana in a couple of weeks for about 7 weeks. For a medical trip over there with GVSU. I have a junior son, Evan. He is our football player. He is being recruited right now by a few D1 and D2 schools for football, so hopefully we'll get a good scholarship out of that. He's my little guy. He's about 6'1", 255. And he's not big enough. We wish he was about 2 inches taller and about 50 pounds heavier, but the weight we can figure out. I'm not sure I can give him any more height. Let me see, the next little guy, Ethan is 13, 7th grade. So we got the middle schooler going on, and then my little guy is 7, and Eli is in a Chinese immersion program and speaking Mandarin and doing all that fun stuff. And he'll have Mandarin all the way through 12 years in the school. So that's my personal life. My wife's a professor at Grand Valley. She's the graduate coordinator for the speech and hearing program at Grand Valley in the master's program. So if any of you are thinking about speech pathology or audiology, you'll be definitely talking with her in the near future, and I can hook you up with her. Let me see, my degrees are from the University of Florida. So I went there as an undergraduate. At that point, there were only 35,000 students on campus. Now there's over 50. One of those huge schools, and easy to get lost in a big place like that. Managed to make it through. Went on to get my master's degree in microbiology, and then my doctorate, my PhD in medical sciences from the College of Medicine. My training is in diabetes and wound healing and wound care, as well as in biochemistry and genetics. So I'm pretty broadly trained. On the weekends and on Fridays, I spend my time at MSU with the first-year medical students, helping them with their first-year curriculum. So staying pretty busy. My first faculty position after finishing my doctorate was at Washington State University. We went out to Spokane, Washington. My wife had just finished her PhD as well, and our first jobs were out there. Then we ended up going to University of Alabama, so we were in Tuscaloosa for about 6 years, yelling Roll Tide when they weren't playing the Gators. And then from Tuscaloosa, we took a few years in Oklahoma, and we've now been in Michigan for about 7.5 years. So this is now home. So it's been kind of bouncing around the country a little bit, but I think we're here. What else? I think that's about it, right? Just a little bit of information. So I do come in from Grand Rapids, so if there's bad weather, I understand that. We'll get over here together. Usually the summer is not a bad trip at all. Any questions just personally? Anything at all? Yeah. Oh. Yep. Okay, so survival skills. Okay, again, students ask me, what do I do? How do I make it through this course? This course has a reputation, if you will, okay, of being kind of tough. It's not personal. I don't take it personally. If you talk to people around the country, anatomy and physiology, has a 50% failure rate across the country. It is it's one of those big gatekeeper courses. We're better than nationally. we've only got about 35 to 40% students not making it through. But that's still a lot of students, right? And if you talk to students who don't make it through, the number one thing is connected to time management. Spending the time to learn the material, coming to lab prepared, focusing as much as you can, and just keeping that Rolodex of information going through your head throughout the summer and throughout the semester. It's not that any one thing we're doing is that hard, there's just a lot of stuff. There's a lot of material. So if you start feeling like you're getting overwhelmed, again, reach out to me, reach out to the tutors, reach out to the tutoring center. Let's get you the help. Reach out to a classmate who's in lab or somebody in the room that you think, hey, maybe they could use another study partner. Please don't just disappear on me. It's the people who just stop coming and disappearing that are the ones who don't do that well. So stay in contact with me and we'll make it work. So number one, come to class. This is just something else I ripped off the internet. Come to class. Number two, budget your time. That's the big one, right? Coming to class and budgeting your time, developing a schedule. Look at the deadlines, anticipate the syllabus, know what's coming up. Find a place to study. Now this summer with the disruption, we don't have that biology resource room quite as set up as we want to. In the new building, we have a beautiful, huge space for the biology resource room. There's going to be a big area dedicated to your learning and studying with models. The library is available to you, right? There's little cubbies in there. There are places on campus you can go, or Starbucks, or wherever it is you want to go to study. But definitely get into a routine. Be a good reader. The book we have, it doesn't have a lot of reading in it. The lab manual is pretty succinct, so you can read through that rather quickly. There's a lot of information there, but definitely read through it. Make sure you know where we're going to be. Look through the syllabus. If there's a question you don't know, look it up, right? In the mastering, I'll show you there's an e-text. And any book, any word that you're reading along in the e-text, if you don't know what it is, you just highlight it and say, what does that mean? It'll tell you. Or you got dictionary.com at your fingertips. So just don't be a good reader. Dig in and ask good questions. When you're reading the chapters, don't just look at the pictures, right? I mean, actually look at those headings. Look at the bold-faced words. Look at the captions underneath the pictures. These are things that sometimes really make the big difference in your understanding it. When you get to the end of the chapter, look at those chapter summaries. Do those review questions. Don't just blow off all that stuff. It's really there to help you, guide you, check to make sure you understand what you just read. If you're looking at a table or a graph or a chart, look at it. Don't just blow over and oh, okay, a big picture, I don't need to look at that. Take a look at it. It's there for a reason. It's going to help you. Again, study partners are very good, and read with a purpose. Ask, why in the world are you learning this? What's the connection here? Also be a good listener. So if I say something 2 or 3 times, it's important, right? I'm giving you all the PowerPoint notes. That's good and that's bad. There are many people in education around the country who would claim that my giving you the PowerPoints is the worst thing I could do for you as student learners. Because what are you having to do? Not much, right? I've already read the book. I've already pulled the pictures together. I've already put the little words next to the pretty pictures. I've already done all that synthesis of work. And in the past, right, pre-PowerPoint days, when I was in school, right, we had to read the book and make the little notes and put all that synthesis together. So by my giving you a PowerPoint lecture, it actually takes away that job of your having to synthesize it. That's the danger. So now you've got to make sure you're keeping things, quote, active. Do things that are going to help you synthesize the material. So read through that little Darley page that I gave you. Think about how you can make this whole learning experience active. You can do that by, again, being a good listener and, ask questions. We've got some time, not a lot of time, but if there's a question that you want to ask, raise your hand. I'll try to answer it. If it's something inappropriate or not at that time, I'll say, let's talk about that later. But I'll do my best to entertain questions. If I don't know it, I'll be the first person to say, I don't know. The human body is vast and marvelous, and there's a lot of things I don't know. So I'll be the first to say that to you. What else? This is all just basic stuff. Lecture notes. Now, I'm giving you all the notes. So you're not probably going to go copy the notes. You've got everything in front of you. So you want to just review them. I'm going to challenge you. I know it's tough if you have lab tonight. But try, before you put your head down on the pillow, to at least review through what you did that day. this class or any other day. Neuroscience tells us that we will make connections with our memory if we will look at something the second time in the same day before we go to sleep. So that when you're sleeping and your neurons are making new connections and making all that restorative connections, that you've got something for them to connect. So if you can at all, at least spend a few minutes looking back through what you learned today before you go to bed. It'll make a big difference in your retention of the material. So try to do that. Challenge yourself to do that. Again, I'm not reading this to you, just kind of looking through this with you. You're not going to recopy your notes in this kind of class, but you definitely want to go back, like I said, and summarize each thing. Try to do it before you go to bed. And try to go over it as often as possible. This is saying once a week, but I'm going to challenge you to try to look at something 4 or 5 times a week. Okay? I'm not going to say every day. Take a couple days off. But try to take a look at your lab and lecture materials 4 or 5 times a week. Keep it fresh. Don't let it get old. Study groups are important. When you're reading and learning, ask yourself why. Why is he telling me this? What's going on here? What's the connection? Try to make the connections. This is not a bunch of random facts. This is about body systems and how our body works together as a cohesive thing. And so the facts I'm telling you are connected to other systems in some way. I'll also say your attitude is important. How many of you are pre-nursing, for example? Raise your hand. A lot of pre-nurses, respiratory therapy, physical therapy, kinesiology, respiratory therapy, what did I already say that? What? Pre-med, anything like that? Most of us are some sort of medical field, right? Of some sort. PA. Okay? My point is, this is foundational. This is not superficial material. This is going to be foundational for most of you in your future endeavors. So hopefully you're intrinsically motivated by it. This is something you want to learn about. So you're turned on by this. This is something really cool for you. So try to keep that energy, keep that inspiration going on as you go through this course. And then finally, as we prepare for exams, I'll tell you more about it. I'll tell you how to get ready. But it does take practice. That's what this mastering stuff's going to do. The online assignments are to help you be, like this suggests, an athlete training for an event. You're going to practice. You're going to go through the lecture. You're going to go through the online homework. You're going to go through the online quiz. And that's going to prepare you for the exam. And it's really important that you do each of those things. And if you do all those things, you'll find the exams much more approachable, much more straightforward. So again, repetition and practice is important, as is getting a good night's sleep. So try not to cram the night before. We all have to cram a little bit, but try not to. Definitely don't be listening to the lecture the night before the exam, right, for the first time. And just, pay close attention, read carefully, and in the end, all of you can do really well. So I always put this slide up here as a reminder that when I was a little freshman at the University of Florida, I was 17 years old. I guess I turned 18 my first week there. And my first semester I was taking Calc 2, and I didn't understand what was happening, but I'm in this class. It started off about this big. It was at 7:25 in the morning. I remember that horror, right? Really early, 4 days a week, 7:25. My professor, Dr. Bacon, he looked like a shriveled piece of bacon. He rode his little bicycle to class every morning with those little ankle straps and the pocket protector and just perfect, picture of the math university professor. And I'm in a room, probably had about 25, 30 people at the beginning of the semester. And by the end of the semester, we're down to about 8 or 9 students. And I'm like, okay, I guess they're just not coming. I'm a stupid freshman. I didn't realize they were all failing out. They also knew that this guy had a reputation. So I've been making B pluses. I was happy. B plus, first semester at Calc 2, I'm happy. He comes in the day after the last day to drop was and said, now, in the end, I will redistribute the grades to make a perfect curve. So my B pluses now were Ds. The rest of the class apparently knew that. I was too stupid and naive to jump out of that class. So my B pluses now were Ds. Okay? So my point is I won't do that to you. Right? If you earn the grade you get, you're going to get the grade you get. I'm not going to redistribute the survivors to recreate some ideal distribution of grades. So you all can make really good grades in this class, and it's just a sort of reminder of some bad professors I've had in the past. Okay. So as we get ready for the first exam, I do want you to think about this. I want you to read through that first page, that Darley suggestion page. Think about what you would do differently or might try this semester. I will ask you a question or two about that on the first exam. So don't blow off that first page. Do read through it. And just think about these study skills that I've listed. I won't be quizzing you or testing you directly on these, but I think you'll find just being reminded of these things is a good way to start the semester. Any questions? Doing okay so far? Pretty straightforward. Now, in this course, in addition to learning anatomy and physiology, I am a big believer that vocabulary is huge to your understanding of the body. And medical terminology is not required for this course. I'm not turning this into a medical terminology course by any means. However, I have put together through the years a series of prefixes and suffixes and root words that are really important to your overall success in reading through this material. In every lecture, I will start off with 4 or 5 of these slides of terms. And that's what, if you look back at the syllabus, I told you that on exam 1, there would be chapters 1 and 2, the lecture from lab 1, and vocab 1 through 20. And that vocab 1 through 20 refers to the slides that are the next thing in your supplement. So turn to the next page, I believe, in your supplement. Am I right about this? Oh no, the next thing is the objectives, right? Okay, so there are objectives. These are like a study guide. There's one for each chapter. Pretty much one for each chapter. Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 3, Chapter 4. So that's what those objectives are. So as you're studying, if you were to say, hey, Dr. Mack, can you give me a study guide for the test? I've already given it to you. That's what those objectives are. Okay? So you've already got that in front of you. Once you go past those objectives, you're going to come to a little blue piece of paper. And after that, then you're going to see some vocabulary slides. Is everyone there with me? Turn over to the next little blue divider in your supplement. And after that, you're going to see vocab. And it says 1, 2, 3, 4. There's about 101 slides that we'll be going throughout the course. The first exam will include the first 20, not the first 20 terms, but the first 20 slides. That's somewhere around 100 terms or so. Okay? And I'll help you get ready for these and understand how to do these as we go through this. In fact, that's a good time for me to do that right now. So I'm going to jump out of here, go to that PowerPoint that I have, and every lecture will start with something from our vocabulary list. I highly recommend flashcards for this. And I recommend not the wire-bound flashcards that are already bound in a little notebook, but just get some little note cards. You could even cut them in half. They don't have to be anything big or extensive. Put a little rubber band around them, throw them in your backpack, throw them in your purse. Every day, flip through the list of terms. If you do that every day, you won't be stressed out the night before the exam. The vocab will be second nature, very straightforward. If you wait till the night before the exam, then the vocabulary will seem like bad medicine. I think it's good medicine. I think it's really, really important for your overall literacy and understanding of the material. So let's go ahead and start with that. I told you we're going to have 4 or 5 slides. I'll go through 5 today. Now, the first exam is going to go 1 through 20. So we're going to have, on the first exam, vocabulary going through cusp. Okay? So you could go ahead right now, and this night or early this week, go ahead and make up some note cards. Grab a small stack of note cards. On one side, put the word on the left-hand side. Okay? On the other side of the card, put the big word up here. So, for example, back to the very first slide. Put A on one side of the card and put without and lacking on the other side. The example that's in smaller print underneath is not something you need to memorize. It's simply an example. Okay? So if you see a word that begins in A, it oftentimes is a negating term, right? It means without or lacking. For example, asymptomatic, without or lacking symptoms. So the asymptomatic is simply an example for you to hang your hat on, to think about it. I'm not going to ask you about that word. I do, however, want you to know that A means without or lacking. If you see a word that begins in AB, oftentimes means away from, to abstain, right? To do without something. Or abduction. We'll talk about abduction later on in the course. But that is to move your body away from the midpoint. Able, capable, like viable. Viable means capable of life. The via part means life or living. So something that's viable is capable of life. If a term ends in "ac," it usually means pertaining to. cardiac, pertaining to the heart. And acetabul, strange little word that we'll make more sense of when we get to the bones, but it literally means vinegar cup. Now, those who've had chemistry, vinegar, and what part of this means vinegar to you? Vinegar, what's the chemical name for vinegar? Anybody know? Acetic acid? Okay, so again, if you've had some chemistry and you can make that connection, fantastic. If you haven't, it's okay. But acetyl is referring to acetic acid, vinegar. And when you see this structure in the lab, you also see this table part in here. And it turns out that when this word was derived in Roman times, the acetabulum, it's a part of your hip bone. And it actually looks like a little cup of vinegar at the table that they thought was customary at that time. So strange little connections, but acetabul means vinegar cup. That's all you need to know, that acetabul means vinegar cup. Acro, extremity. Acromegaly, megaly means an enlargement, acro, extremity. This is Shrek, right? Andre the Giant and Shrek have acromegaly. It's an enlargement of the facial features, enlargement of the hands. Aku, think acoustics, hearing. Adip refers to fat. When we look at fat under the microscope in a couple of weeks, that's adipose tissue. So adip is fat. AD is toward or near to. Adduction. Adduction is moving toward something, toward the midline. And adeno, a gland. An adenoma would be a tumor, a growth of a gland. Aero oxygen, pretty straightforward. AL, like ac, means pertaining to. So AL and AC both mean the same thing, pertaining to. AF is toward. We'll see later on in the nervous system, and quite often we'll talk about afferent things or afferent things. And AF means toward, ferent means to carry, so to move something toward something. Albi, think albino, white. Aliment, your digestive tract, your digestive system is by some books historically called the alimentary canal. The reason is that's how you gain most of your nourishment. So aliment means nourishment. Algia is some sort of painful condition. Myalgia, pain of the muscles, right? Alveole, in your lungs there are these little air sacs called alveoli. They're these little tiny hollow cavities. Another term, alveolus, is also the space in your jawbone where your teeth are in. So that's also an alveolus, where the tooth fits into the socket, into the space. And then ambi, like ambidextrous, meaning something on both sides. So when the time for the test, when the test comes, I'll be asking you these terms. It'll be these same terms, and I'll put these terms together in different ways. For example, I might say, what does ambialgia mean? And you would say for 2 points, ambi means both sides, algia means pain. Okay? So that's how I'll do this. So as you're making your note cards, you've got them made up, you're flashing through them every once in a while, and a couple of days before the exam, just kind of put the cards on the table and say, okay, what could Max put that word and that word together? Could he put that one and that one together? It doesn't change anything, but it's going to help you be more prepared for the exam. So for example, ambialgia, right, is just from this slide alone, would be pain on both sides. And then AN, same as A, another negating term meaning without or lacking. So you can put those on the same card, right? You can put A and AN on the same note card. We've got andro, meaning male, angio, pertaining to vessels. Angiology is a study of vessels. Angiopathy would be a disease of your blood vessels. And finally for today, aqua, meaning water. So I'll go through about 5 of these every lecture. We'll start off every lecture with 5 or so of these slides. First exam goes through 20. So go ahead and in the next few days, before things get too crazy, go ahead and make up note cards A through cusp. The second exam will be 21 through whatever it says. So this will be non-cumulative. Non-cumulative. So the vocab on exam 1 is 1 through 20. The vocab on exam 2 will be slides 21 through whatever it says. Any concerns or questions about vocab? This usually goes really, really well for most students. And there's always somebody around the fourth exam who says, gee, I'm just not doing very well in the vocab. What do you suggest, Dr. Macauley? And I'll say, well, are you using note cards? Man, that's a good idea. I think I'll do that. So I just encourage note cards. There are many other ways to do this, but I think note cards for this particular activity is by far the easiest way. And pull out that little stack of cards every once in a while and review those terms, and it won't seem like a lot of hard work at all when the time comes for the test. So that's our vocab. Every day I'll start off with that. Let's go back now to the PowerPoints and take a look. Here we go. And get started with Chapter 1 material. Okay. Before I do this, though, I'm going to go ahead and give you that 10-minute break or so. So why don't I give you a break to about 20 after? Just restrooms, guys are here in this hallway. Women, anybody know the closest? What's that? By the elevator. Okay, that's right. By the elevators, okay. So both restrooms are really close here. Water fountain down here as well. Pop machine down here. So let me give you about 10 minutes, and I'll see you here in a couple of moments. Okay, so what I'll be doing is at the end of this, I'll be uploading this to YouTube. It takes about 5 minutes for me to upload it, about 10 minutes for it to get processed, and then you'll see this tonight, and I'll make that folder about it. And you'll always be able to go back and review this lecture if you want to do that. So let's get started. This is just the very beginning of anatomy and physiology. So let's figure out what it is that we're studying. And anatomy is the study of structure. It's the pieces, it's the parts. It is naming lots of things. And this is where, if you are good at memorizing lists of things, then this is easy for you. If that's more difficult for you, you've got some work to do. But we will be naming lots of things this semester. It comes from the Greek word to cut up or to cut open. And so this is how we have learned about anatomy, is that we have opened up bodies and we've opened up organs. And we have taken a look at those structures. In medical schools, most medical schools still use cadaver labs to learn their anatomy. Some have gone virtual, but most are sticking with the good old real body. Now, we're also dealing with physiology. The physiology is the other half of the equation. How do things work? How do those pieces and parts go together, and what it is that they do? Anatomy is, you would think by now we've got all of anatomy figured out. It's not true. There are still university departments of anatomy. We're still learning more things about our bodies and about ourselves. So this is not something we've already got figured out. We're still learning about anatomy. We're especially still learning about physiology. Right? How is it that different body systems talk to each other? In your lab pre-labs, you've looked at those 11 or 12 body systems. You know there are these different body systems. And we'll talk about them individually. We'll learn about them individually, but keep in mind, each of these body systems is talking to the other systems in some holistic way. It's really difficult, if not impossible, to separate these two fields. Some universities have an anatomy class. It's pure anatomy. You're just learning bones and structures and name that, name that, name that. Then they'll have a physiology class where they assume you know all the anatomy, now you learn the physiology. We're going to marry them together. This more traditional way where we'll be talking about some anatomy and some physiology. In Biology 105, it's a heavier anatomical emphasis. There'll be more emphasis on learning the pieces and the parts and the structures. In 106, we'll add to that a little bit, and we'll definitely add a lot more physiology. So that's how we divide up A&P 1 and 2 at Muskegon. It's a little bit different than most institutions, but it works pretty well. So form is related to function. Like I said, you can't separate them. To put this into a general analogy, if we're talking about a bicycle, anatomy would be all the parts, right? The pedals, the spokes, the wheels, the brakes, all that. And then that'd be just labeling, right? Name that part, name that part, name that part. And then the physiology would be what? How does one get on it? How does one pedal? How do the gears work? How does all that work together? So we really can't, anatomy without physiology is kind of boring, and physiology without the anatomy is almost unintelligible. So you have to have both together. Now, I am not going to quiz you on these next 4 or 5 historical figures, but you will occasionally hear them, and if you're ever on Jeopardy, it's good to know these things. And Aristotle, right? Aristotle, if I am on Jeopardy, my answer is going to be Aristotle or Leonardo da Vinci, for anything I don't know about. It seems they did everything, right? So Aristotle, BC was the first person to write about anatomy, at least the first person who was credited with writing about anatomy. And he wrote this little book called Of Parts of Animals. I read this book in high school. I remember this little tiny book of Parts of Animals. And it basically said this, that as humans or as anything, we're made up of smaller parts. And those smaller parts are made up of even smaller parts. And he was the first person to put this to words. So we're going to be breaking up our course exactly that same way. We're going to start with protons and electrons and neutrons later today and next time. And we're going to build it up and talk about cells and organelles and up through the tissues. So we're going to be building our course just like Aristotle suggested, which is true. And then there's Herophilus. Herophilus was also antiquity, the anatomist of antiquity. He dissected hundreds of cadavers, did a lot of public demonstrations, and I can't quite imagine that gore. Can you? Have you ever been to, I mean, this is Greece, kind of a warm place. Can you imagine open bodies, human, in the hot, open areas, having public dissections, and the flies and the bugs and the gross and kind of not the most pleasant thought. But his work was very important all the way up, at least in the Western world, through the Renaissance, because he actually looked at cadavers. Then you get to Galen, and Galen was in the Roman time. Well, when we get to Galen, they had basically said that cadaver dissection was not allowed. Now, I'm sure there were still people digging up dead bodies and checking them out. But for the most part, human cadaver dissections were banned, and so medicine progressed very slowly because we were no longer looking at human bodies. We were looking at animals instead. And if you look at a mouse we'll be looking at fetal pigs, they're pretty close to human, but there are some very distinct differences. And if we depended upon the anatomy of a pig to understand our anatomy, we'd be in trouble in a few places. And so there was definitely a slowing down, if you will, of progression, but that was true across all areas, wasn't it? So up until the Renaissance, there wasn't a whole lot going on in academia. Then we get to the Renaissance, and all of a sudden, here's this guy, Leonardo da Vinci. And he drew some beautiful pictures. And if you're at all interested, I've got a website here just to take a look at it. You've probably seen the Vitruvian Man, and that's a pretty famous figure of his work. And he has some beautiful, beautiful artwork, but very, very important in putting structure to art again. Vesalius was now considered the pioneer of modern anatomy. We are now doing cadaver dissections once again in medical fields and for the furtherment of the field of anatomy. And he was the one who promoted the idea of living anatomy, that is, that our tissues are alive, and pretty famous for his work. And that's it. I'm not going to quiz you or have you differentiate on these guys, but you'll see these names as you look through different books and in the future as you talk about anatomy. So where I really want to pick up is right here. So we know what the definition of anatomy and physiology are. Now let's just talk about microscopic versus macroscopic anatomy. This basically means what can we see under a microscope, what can we see with our bare eyes. If it's under a microscope, it is microscopic and is broken into two basic areas, cytology and histology. Cyto means cell. So cytology is a study of cells. We'll definitely be doing that. We'll be looking at tissues and cells under the microscope. And then the study of tissues is histology. So we'll be doing a lot of histology. Lab number 3, in a couple of weeks, we'll be spending the entire time looking under the microscope at muscle tissue and nervous tissue and bone and cartilage and fat and blood. We'll be looking at all those different types of tissues under the microscope, and that'll be the study of histology. If instead you're using your naked eye to view something, that's called gross anatomy. And so this is what you're doing. For example, when you're doing a cadaver dissection, you are looking at the body with the naked eye. Aristotle, not that I'm going to have you memorize his name, but he was the dude who said, right, that things are built up from less complex things. So this hierarchy that's shown here is much like what Aristotle wrote about. And this is also how our textbook and how the course is arranged. So in the upper left-hand corner, we see these little dots. Those are atoms. Atoms are things like sodium and chloride and hydrogen and helium and potassium. And those different atoms are going to combine to make molecules, things like water, H2O, Things like CO2, simple molecules, and we'll talk more about these. This is just an example. There's a couple of levels that are not shown on this image that I want to at least mention right now. So we're going to go from this atom level to the molecule, and then it jumps and goes to the cells. But in between there are two more levels of organization that I want to mention, and then they'll be in the slides coming up. After you make the simple molecules, there's another level called the macromolecules. Okay? And there's 4 different types of macromolecules that I'll introduce to you in a moment. And then those macromolecules are going to be important in making organelles. Again, I have a slide coming up on these. So the organelles are like the Golgi and the nucleus and the endoplasmic reticulum. They're the building blocks of the cell. Once we've got our organelles, then we can talk about cells. Those cells are then going to combine to make tissues. Those tissues are going to be important in creating organs. If I took your intestines, your stomach, your liver, all of those organs would then be building blocks to create, for example, your digestive system, one of the body systems or organ systems. And then finally, all of those 11 body systems, 12 if you consider the 2 different reproductive systems, male and female, those systems combine now to make the entire organism. Okay? So this hierarchy, okay, is what I just call atom to atom. Okay? Atom to atom. So this atom to atom continuum is important for you to appreciate as we go through this course and as we just think about how all of these things work together. So let me go through each of these levels with a slide or 2 each, just to get us going around this. This is all chapter 1, very much introductory stuff, and then we'll be going back and spending a lot more time on each of these levels as we go through. So you've probably seen a chart like this. This is the periodic table. You're not going to have to memorize this. This is not a chemistry class. But you've probably seen something like this, and those blocks each represent on the table one of the elements found on the Earth. And, for example, in the upper left, we have H, that's hydrogen. And other ones you'll recognize, probably C for carbon, O for oxygen, right? Na in here is for sodium, some that you've probably recognized. So this is the most basic level that we're going to deal with. In fact, I'm going to lie a little bit. I'm going to go back one more step. If I had a solid chunk of gold in my hand, right? Gold is one of the elements. What is making up that solid chunk of gold? If I have a solid chunk of gold, that's made up of solid gold atoms, right? And if I had a solid chunk of carbon, right, diamond, right, pure carbon, then that would be made up of all carbon atoms. And if I had, you get the idea. So each of the elements on the Earth is made up of these atoms. And we are going to break that down just a little bit more when we get to chapter 2, but for now, this is where I'm going to start our organizational story. Now, those atoms, things like chlorine and sodium and oxygen, they're going to be the building blocks to make molecules. Simple molecules, H2O. What does that mean? H2O. It means that I have 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen that combine in a special, unique way to make water. Or something like CO2. 1 carbon combining with 2 oxygens in a unique and special way to make a gas called carbon dioxide. That's it, right? Just the basic idea of molecules being formed by atoms. Then, as I mentioned before, molecules, simple molecules, small molecules, are going to combine in large special ways to make macromolecules. There are 4 groups of macromolecules, and we'll spend a little bit of time talking about each of those groups in chapter 2. These are going to include things like proteins. In fact, your 4, let's talk about the 4 groups of macromolecules. Let me go back. So there's 4 groups of macromolecules. Number 1, I said it, proteins. Number 2, carbohydrates, absolutely. No particular order. Okay, so we've got proteins, carbohydrates. Number 3, perfect, lipids. Now, lipids is a big category that includes fats and oils. And then the 4th, it's mentioned here. See where it says DNA? The 4th group is going to be nucleic acids, and that's going to be DNA and RNA and their related cousins. Okay? So we've got proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and nucleic acids, and those are the 4 groups of macromolecules. Other books would call those the 4 groups of organic molecules. Okay? So we'll talk about organic molecules a little bit in chapter 2, but if you take an organic chemistry class, you're talking about those 4 groups of molecules over and over and over. These are the molecules that make up our biochemistry as well. So we've got our macromolecules. Those macromolecules are now going to be very important for making organelles. The organelles are the building components of cells. Organelles are going to include things like the Golgi apparatus, the nucleus itself, even the plasma membrane can be considered an organelle. Things like the lysosomes and the peroxisomes, and we'll talk about each of those a little bit more detail in chapter 3. Mitochondria. For now, we're just kind of getting that atom-to-atom continuum out of the way. So after we have the organelles, now we finally get up to cells. If we were studying cells, that would be the study of what again? Study of cells is cytology. And cells are going to be, by all record, the smallest living thing in your body. You're composed of trillions of cells. Each of those cells is talking to other cells. There's over 250 different kinds of cells in your body. It's a pretty amazing story. We'll talk more about that as we go closer to chapter 3. But each of the cells in your body is the smallest living thing. Now, those cells are going to combine in unique ways to make tissues. Tissues are groups of cells that have a common job. And there are 4 groups of tissues as well. So there's 4 groups of macromolecules. There's also 4 groups of tissues. And we will spend a lot of time becoming familiar with these 4 groups of tissues. Let me just introduce them to you now. In no particular order, the first group of tissues includes connective tissues. Now, this is a very broad group of tissues. This is going to include bone, cartilage, blood, fat. All right, there's some blood. These are all connective tissues. Some of them are hard, some of them are liquid, some of them are kind of squishy. There's all sorts of connective tissues. We'll learn about 6 of them, what they look like under the microscope, where they're found in their body. We'll go through that story in Lab 3. There's also muscle tissue. Muscle tissue is unique in that it moves. Right? That's what makes this tissue special. It comes in 3 flavors. There's skeletal muscle. That's the type that is making up your muscles that you move, your biceps, your triceps. There's cardiac muscle, which is found only in the heart, which has a special job and a special look under the microscope. And there's smooth muscle, the kind of muscle around your gut, around your blood vessels, around your bladder, which is in part squeezing. It's involuntary. We'll get into all of those things later on. It also has a different look under the microscope. So we'll learn what each of those looks like. Just for now, know that there's muscle tissue. The third type of tissue is epithelial tissues. Epithelial tissue is found, has a different job. It's found coating and covering. Coating and covering. So in lab, if you were in lab this afternoon, you heard me talk about the serous membranes. The rest of you will hear it tonight or Wednesday. When we talked about the parietal and the serous membranes, right? The parietal and the visceral layers, those are epithelial layers. They are coating organs and they are lining body cavities. That's where we find these things. We also find epithelial tissues as the outer layer of your skin, right? The epidermis, the outer layer of your skin, is epithelial in nature. The last place where you'll find a lot of epithelial tissue are your glands. So the pancreas, the mammary glands, the salivary glands, the liver, mostly epithelial. Not completely, but mostly epithelial. Then finally, there's nervous tissue. Nervous tissue is special in that it does what? It doesn't move, doesn't line and coat, but it travels, right? It sends electrical signals very, very quickly. So each of these tissues has a very different architecture, has a different purpose. And we'll talk about there's nervous tissue is found all over your body, but a lot of it in your brain and your spinal cord. So those are the 4 types of tissues. Then what do those tissues do? They create organs. If I had a heart in my hand, and you'll have a heart in your hand soon enough, that heart has in it some muscle, some nervous tissue, some epithelial tissue, and some connective tissue. If I had a chunk of skin, it would have muscle, nervous, connective, and epithelial. If I had a pancreas, whatever it is, right? Whatever that organ is, there's going to be a new and unique arrangement of these 4 tissue types. So now we've got our organs: heart, liver, kidney, brain. Okay? And those organs are now going to combine in unique ways to make the organ systems or the body systems. There's 11 of those in your body. We all have 11. As you're studying it, there'll be male and female reproductive, so there'll be 12 total organ systems that we'll describe this semester. So let's go through those. Now, as I go through these organ systems, there's a couple of things you want to be able to do. Number 1, name it when you see it. Recognize it on an image like this, or one that's like in your lab book or in the Martini textbook. Number 2, know the organs that are included. So as I go through these, your understanding of this will become more complex as we go through the course, but know the major components of these systems, the major organs. And then finally, have a couple different functions, a couple different purposes that these systems do for you overall. So the first system, the integumentary system. Well, we know that's our skin, but it's also the hair and the nails that are derived from your skin. We know it protects, but it's also where your nerve endings are for touch. It's also in your skin that you initiate the process of vitamin D. So we get some vitamin D through our skin, and that vitamin D is important for our bone health. So again, we want to appreciate that our systems are not isolated. They work together to maintain our overall well-being. And the integumentary system is also important for preventing water loss. Right? We don't have to lose water. If someone has a major burn and they lose a portion of their skin, one of the biggest struggles is water retention. You give them an IV, and that fluid is just draining out of their body. It's all over their bed. It's all over their floor. So the integumentary system, our skin intact, is helping to keep out viruses and bacteria, but it's also helping to keep our own fluid levels inside. Number 2, pretty obvious, skeletal system, all the bones of the body. But there's a few other things happening besides just protecting our brain and protecting our organs and connecting to our muscles and allowing to move. Inside your bones is where you are making your blood cells. And that process is called hematopoiesis. Okay? Hemato meaning blood, and poiesis meaning the formation of. So hematopoiesis. And that is happening in many of your bones. And this is also where your body is going to store calcium and store phosphorus in rather large amounts. And that may not seem that important yet. But as we go through the course, you're going to appreciate what calcium does. And we need to have a lot of calcium for your bones, but also calcium for your muscles to work. We need to have calcium for your brain to send signals. And we need to have calcium for your blood to clot. So we need to have calcium and we need to have a lot of it, but we don't want it floating through our blood in all the time, because then we have other problems. So we need to store that calcium and release it as needed. And then finally, there's, of course, when you connect your bones to the muscles, you've got now movement. But I want you to separate structure from movement. So when you think about the bones, I want you to think structure, right? Protection, the cranial bones protect the brain, the vertebral bones protect the spinal cord, the pelvic bones protect the reproductive organs. And when we think about muscles, I want you to think about movement. Yes, they work together, but let's separate the two down the middle. So then we have the muscular system, pretty obvious. All the muscles you're looking at in this picture are the kinds of muscles that we have control over. These are all skeletal muscles. And if you're cold, you're going to shiver, right? You're going to shiver, you get up and move around, and that's going to also help generate some heat. So you've got some heat generation as well as movement of the body. nervous system. When you see yellow structures in anatomy, yellow is not exclusively, but most oftentimes referring to something in the nervous system. All of these yellow structures you're seeing are nerves traveling through the body. In addition, kind of hard to see, are the brain and the spinal cord that are also part of the nervous system. Okay. Now the nervous system is doing what? It's taking in all of the environmental signals, it's sending out instructions to the rest of our body, it's integrating all that information. Pretty cool stuff. We'll spend the most time this semester on the nervous system. We're going to spend almost 5 chapters talking about the nervous system. So it's pretty important. Number 1, studied system. Number 2, this semester will be cardiovascular. We'll definitely spend about 3 chapters talking about blood and the heart. But nervous will be number 1, cardiovascular will be number 2 as far as the time that we spend dealing with those systems. Endocrine system. If you look at this, what you see are a bunch of small organs. If I looked at this image quickly, and I just glanced up at this thing, if this was on an exam and it said name this system, you could look up and see the heart and say, oh, I see the heart, so that must be the cardiovascular system. Or you could quickly look up and say, oh, I see the brain, so that must be the nervous system. Or you could look up and see the kidney and say, oh, that's the urinary system. But all of these organs together are working, and they do one thing in particular. They all release hormones. So these are the endocrine. So we recombine these organs in different arrangements. So the endocrine organs collectively all release hormones into the bloodstream. That's what the word means. Endo, when we get to the E's in vocab, we'll see this. But endo means within, and crine or crine means to secrete. Right? So endocrine, all these organs secrete hormones within the body into the bloodstream. Cardiovascular, red and blue. A lot of arteries and veins. You see the heart in here as well. Pretty obvious. Pumping blood. When you're pumping blood, though, you're not just pumping blood. You're moving oxygen around. You're moving around CO2. You're moving around hormones, nutrients, waste products. There's a lot of stuff dependent upon the heart to pump it around the body. At first glance, this looks like a bad paint job. Right? It looks like cardiovascular with green. You see the heart on there. But green is one of those universal colors for the lymphatic system. These are lymphatic vessels. Along the way, you see little nodule structures. Those are little lymph nodes. This is going to include the spleen and include the thymus, include the tonsils. All of those are working together to help create part of your immune system, and we'll be discussing that a little bit in lab, a little bit in lecture, and that'll be one of the topics of your take-home exam will be over lymphatic. Respiratory system, a couple lungs. Right? We see the trachea, air going in, air coming out. Pretty straightforward. We'll talk about the respiratory system toward the end of the course. The digestive system, liver, stomach, large and small intestines, pancreas, gallbladder. These are all involved with breaking down and absorbing nutrients and getting rid of the waste products through defecation. Urinary system, I see a couple kidneys. The urine is made in the kidneys, filters the blood, and travels down the ureter down to the bladder. The bladder then stores that urine for a short while before releasing it through the urethra. We'll talk about the urinary system quite a bit toward the end of the course. And then we have the two reproductive systems. Male reproductive system, the testes making testosterone and other hormones, important for sexual development, the production of sperm and reproduction. And then finally the female reproductive system, including the breast, the making of eggs or oocytes, the production of hormones, also the initiation of fertilization and growth and development of the embryo and fetus. So all of those are responsibilities of the female reproductive system. Now, you don't have to memorize this entire list. for each of these systems. The test is going to be largely multiple choice, and so it might go something like this. The following characteristics are all part of what system? And there'd be like 3 or 4 characteristics, and there'd be some systems, and you would recognize, okay, all those are part of the reproductive system, or part of those of the respiratory system. Or it could say, which of the following is not true of the respiratory system? And there'd be 3 or 4 facts, and one of them just is outside of the norm, right? So 3 of them make sense for the respiratory system, and 1 does not. So that's how you would be quizzed or tested on this. It's not something that you'll have to list out all of the possible functions of any particular system. You wouldn't have to name all of the organs of any particular system at this point. We're still learning this from the ground up. When you look back at these pictures, or pictures like it, there's a different set of these images in the Ammerman Lab Manual. There's a different set of these images in your Martini textbook. This is yet a different set of series of images. You need to be able to, one, again, like I said, recognize it, know the organs that are part of that system, and know what those systems are doing. So that's your big starting lesson as we go through these body systems. And then what do all these systems do? They combine to make the organism, right? To make the holistic individual. Now, this is a human anatomy course, so we're talking about the little creature down there in the bottom right? We're talking about human anatomy. But if this were just a general biology course, everything I've said to you is basically true of a killer whale, or of a bumblebee, or of a flower, right? Pretty much the same levels of hierarchy and construction. And even on the lower left, some sort of paramecium, even a single cell organism, right, would have all of the other levels of organization involved with them. They just wouldn't be many cells, and maybe not as many organs and things, but still, this idea of levels of organization would be true of any living thing. So that's sort of the atom-to-atom continuum. Any thoughts or questions, concerns about that sequence of ideas? Okay. So that's anatomy, right? Pretty much anatomy. How's it all go together? Pieces and parts. One of the key terms that I want to introduce to you from physiology is this term homeostasis. Homeo meaning same or similar. Stasis means standing still. This is basically why it is that even when it's negative 20 outside or 105 outside, that your body temperature doesn't change very much. No matter what the external environment is, your internal environment stays relatively constant. Not exactly the same, but within a normal range. Your heart, your blood pressure, your respiratory rate, your glucose levels, your blood levels of different molecules, those are all staying within a normal range. And your body is going to keep these things in that normal range as much as possible. There comes, however, a time, perhaps, where the body can no longer maintain homeostasis. And then we're seeing a doctor, and we're calling that a disease. So when the body can no longer maintain your blood pressure, you've got hypertension. When your body can no longer maintain your blood glucose levels, maybe diabetes. When you no longer can maintain your, whatever, you name it, right? There's a disease associated with your body's inability to maintain that normal range. Okay, so I'll talk about this negative feedback idea in a moment, but homeostasis is maintained largely through this idea of negative feedback. Give me a moment, I'll get into that. And finally, I'm going to amend my last statement here. It says that every system in your body is involved with maintaining your homeostasis except one. I'm going to cross that off and say, you know what, they all are. Because while one cannot live, one can live without their reproductive system, the hormones produced by the ovaries and the testes certainly have a lot to do with, quote, what we would call normal physiology. And it is possible to live without them. However, it still would not be, quote, a normal existence. So I'm going to say that all body systems are maintaining through hormones and other interactions your homeostasis. So I told you that cells are living, right? They're the first living thing in our body. So it doesn't matter what biology book you open up. Every biology book starts off with what are the properties of life, right? Because biology is a study of life. This is the biology course. So what is life? So here's the list. Now, open up a different book and you'll see essentially the same list, maybe with one or two fewer or more facts, but it's essentially the same list. So all living things will be organized. That is, they'll be composed of at least one cell, if not more. All living things will have a metabolism. That's a fancy way of saying that they take in energy and use it. So all living cells will have a metabolism. We have a metabolism, cells have a metabolism. All living things are responsive. We respond to our environment, or cells respond to their neighboring cells. So all living things respond to the neighboring environment. All cells grow and develop. They have a life cycle. They grow, they have some sort of life cycle. All living things reproduce, make more of themselves, or have the ability to produce more of themselves. And finally, along the way, there's a lot of regulation going on. The other word for that regulation would be homeostasis. So the ability for all of your systems to work together in a meaningful way and maintain your internal environment, that's the homeostasis. Okay, so I told you that cells are living. So that means that cells must also have the same list, right? So essentially cells do. They have the ability to regulate their internal environment. What's the big word for that? Homeostasis, right? Cells take in and use energy. Big word? Metabolism. Cells are going to respond to their local environment. They're going to be responsive. Cells are going to be made up of complex organization. They're made up of organelles and macromolecules. And they're going to reproduce and divide more of themselves. So, cells, right? They're living. So a question for you. This is an egg you got at Myers. Is it living? It's an egg. Is this egg living? Is it a cell? It is a cell. Okay. Is it living? Does it have some of the signs of life? Does it have a metabolism? Kind of, right? It doesn't really respond to its environment very much, but it does have nutrients on the inside, and those nutrients are important for sustaining life for a while if this egg were to become fertilized. But it really doesn't meet all the standards, does it? So we wouldn't say that this egg is alive, most of us. How about sperm? They wiggle, they must be alive. How's any different? Can a sperm in and of itself make more life? Does a sperm respond to environment? Absolutely. They're heat-seeking missiles, so they're moving toward chemical and temperature changes. But they can't reproduce on their own, right? They have their own little metabolism. But I guess my point is that it's not quite as black and white as we would suggest. So an egg, right? We know it's a cell. It's an egg cell. We don't usually throw the word cell on it, but it is a cell. It doesn't meet all the standards of life? No. Sperm? The other half of the equation, I always hear people say, yeah, it's alive, right? It's no different, right? It can't supply all the needs for life, but we know it's a cell. How about red blood cells? Anybody know anything about red blood cells? The red blood cells traveling in your blood that are carrying oxygen right now, they don't have a nucleus. They can't divide. They don't have any DNA. They can't make more of themselves. So you could even argue that red blood cells are not living. Right? They're just kind of these things that float through our body. So the line for living and non-living is kind of squiggly. But I want you to appreciate that most of the cells in your body do meet the standard of life, and they do have all these characteristics. Some cells in your body will never divide. Your neurons, your nerve cells, once they're formed, that's it. They're not going to divide. They're still cells. That doesn't take away from their ability to be considered a living thing. So again, my point is kind of muck it up a little bit. It's not quite as straightforward as you would think. I just want you to think a little bit about that, okay? Any thoughts or questions about that? It's always a fun conversation. Egg, sperm, red blood cells. Right? Are they living? Are they not living? Do you care? It's kind of fun to think about. If you're into cell biology like I am, it's kind of fun. Right? Okay. Any thoughts? Okay. So, I've had people get up on almost stand on their desk and tell me that thing's alive, that chicken egg, okay? And then I have to say, well, this is not a chicken egg that's on the farm. This is one that's just going to be in your omelet next week. It's alive. Okay, fine, it's alive. Go ahead.
Let's use like a different part of the chicken. If you're taking the muscle tissue from the chicken, it's not alive. It's just the muscle tissue that hasn't decayed yet that you can still eat.
Absolutely. What you're putting on your table is no longer sustaining life, but at the moment it was harvested, it was living. I mean, muscle tissue what you're eating is steak and chicken. That's muscle of the animal. It is living within you. Your muscles are, quote, living, right? They're made of cells. So, a lot of people become vegetarians very quickly when we start talking about muscle. But no, the point is, muscle tissue in you, we could argue it's living, right? It's made of cells. It has a metabolism. It's doing its thing. The moment we take it out and put it on a frying pan, it's now dead tissue, right? Nourishment. Okay, so I mentioned homeostasis. Homeostasis was the idea that no matter what's going on outside, our body on the inside stays relatively constant, not perfectly constant. Our heart rate goes up and down. Our respiration rate goes up and down. Our blood sugar levels go up and down. But there is a set point. There is an idealized norm. And this is the idea of negative feedback. So I'll show you a picture in a moment. This is kind of like a thermometer, right? A thermostat in your house. And I want to jump over to that picture first, actually. So if we think about the temperature in your house, let's say it's summertime, we're almost there, right? And so you've set your thermostat. What temperature do you like to keep your house at? 72, whatever it is, right? So that would be, quote, the set point. That's the temperature, that's the idealized temperature that your house is going to be maintained at. But we know it doesn't stay right at 72. It fluctuates. So it's summertime. So what happens? Our houses aren't perfectly insulated, so over time the temperature rises. And at some point, above that 72 degrees, what happens? AC kicks on, or we start sweating, one or the other, right? So the AC kicks on. And what does that do? Brings the temperature back down. Now, is it going to stop at 72? No, it's going to drop the temperature down probably to 71 or 70. So it's going to bring it down below 72 and bring it a little bit, overshoot it. And then what's going to happen right here? The AC turns off, right? And so just because of insulation, again, the temperature is going to rise. So we see that there's a fluctuation around an idealized 72-degree set point. This is true for your blood pressure, for your blood sugar, for your sodium levels, whatever it is. There is a set point that your body has set, and your body is going to maintain it around that level through negative feedback. Negative feedback are these arrows pushing things back to where they should be. So in your body, let's switch from temperature to blood sugar. So you just had a meal. A little bit of sugar mixed in there. Doesn't matter. Any kind of meal is going to do this. And clean this off. What happens, this is going to be your glucose levels now. There's a certain amount of glucose that should be in your blood. And you just had a meal, so what happens? Your blood glucose goes up. Okay? Now at some point, as your blood glucose goes up, this big arrow now represents your pancreas releasing a hormone called insulin. And insulin basically tells the blood sugar to go back down. Insulin is released by the pancreas and tells basically the cells of your body it's time to eat. Right? It's the supper alarm. And it tells all the cells in your body to start eating. And as a result of all the cells taking in the sugar, right, the blood sugar comes down. Now it'll go down lower than it should. And at some point, it'll come down and get too low. Now what happens? There's another hormone, also made by the pancreas, called glucagon. We'll get to this. Don't worry about the details right now. There's another hormone. That glucagon now kicks up and says it's time to raise your blood sugar. And now it starts to break down sugar from your own liver and from your own tissues and to restore that blood glucose. Now, why is it so important that we maintain blood glucose at a relatively common level, stable level? Your brain absolutely requires constant glucose. And if you're hypoglycemic and you don't have enough sugar, what do people complain about? They feel dizzy. They feel kind of like they're going to faint, right? So low blood sugar will be starving your brain of sugar. Too much is not good either. So again, our body wants to maintain a normal level of sugar. Okay? So the idea is that if our body can no longer maintain this, we've got some sort of disease going on, and each of these big arrows is some mechanism, usually a hormone, not always, but usually a hormone that taps that value back toward the set point, toward the optimum. That's the idea of negative feedback. Now, there's also, if there's negative feedback, there must be positive feedback, and there is such a thing. There aren't as many of these examples in our body, but there are a few, and I'll share them with you now. And basically, positive feedback, and I think these words are kind of backwards. Positive feedback is when something starts to go out of normal, it continues to get worse and worse and worse, or more and more and more against the norm. One example would be childbirth. When the uterus begins to contract, and there are hormones being released by the brain, oxytocin being one of those, and the uterus begins to contract, there really isn't a natural mechanism to stop that uterus from contracting. Right? Women who go into premature labor, we put them in the hospital and we give them medication. But the body really doesn't have a way of stopping that. Once it begins, it usually goes to completion, and the uterus will continue to contract until a baby's born. Another one, just as an example, is milk flow. Also, during breastfeeding, there's really no way to stop that, if you will. There's no real hormone to stop that. The example I want to show you as a graph is excessively low blood pressure. So let's take a look at this. So this black line going across the center represents your normal average blood pressure. That's your, quote, set point. What's your normal pressure? What should it be? 120/80, something like that, right? Something like that. So these two numbers, maybe this is 120 and maybe this is 80, just as an idea, right? We'll talk about this when we get there. So we have this fluctuating up and down blood pressure. Now, what happens if someone starts to bleed out? Someone has a significant hemorrhage, they're bleeding out. If you slice an artery and you're squirting blood on the ceiling, right? Your body really can't stop that blood from leaving your body. There's no way to stop it. You're going to have to apply some pressure, try to stop that bleed if you can. But as you bleed, your pressure is going down, 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 down. So what's happening? It's getting worse and worse and worse, isn't it? It's going further and further and further away from where normal should be. Now, this is an example of positive feedback. It's not a good outcome. It's not a positive outcome, right? It's death, right? But it is an example of positive feedback because as the value went away from normal, it continued to go further and further and further away from normal. So that's positive feedback. There's only 4 or 5 examples in your body. I've shared with you 3 of them. Most of our homeostasis is maintained by negative feedback. Some hormone pushing it back toward normal. Okay, I'm going to finish up this chapter. I've got about 3 minutes and about 4 slides, so that's perfect. This is not in your book, but I want you to be aware of the 4 or 5 common types of imaging. Is anyone here going into radiography? Okay, so some of you are going to radiography. You're going to be looking at MRIs and CT scans and X-rays and PET scans and all sorts of things. In fact, this field is just growing crazy. Let me just go through some basic ones, and in fact, this can be updated in a lot of different ways. But imaging, radiography, X-rays, right? So we take a pretty high powerful X-ray, we put it through your tissues, and it turns out that those X-rays pass through soft tissues and are absorbed by the denser tissues like bone. You get this inverse relationship in the image. And not only do bones show up well and teeth show up well, but also tumors. So solid tumors are also seen in X-rays. Now the good thing is that we can see those dense things. The bad news is sometimes the bones are overlapping or you can't see what's behind another bone. So some things can be easily obscured in an X-ray. So we have to do it from multiple angles. Also, you don't want to have a lot of exposure to X-rays. Over time, we know that that can cause problems. There's also sonography. This has come a long, long way. I need to change my bottom image there, my bottom statement. These things are now in very sharp, much sharper details, or even now in in 4D with time and color, really cool things. But there's no x-rays here. This is just sonography. This is just sound waves bouncing off tissues. It can be used to look at an inflamed organ, or look more commonly during development to look at the fetus. So no harmful x-rays, very low issues with this at all. Then there's CT scans or CAT scans. This is using computer-enhanced technology. It can slice through tissues. This is basically low-intensity x-rays. So you're still looking at high, dense things. This is going to show bones and tumors and teeth pretty well. It's not good for soft tissue. But the nice thing about it is that you don't have overlapping issues. So you can see one structure behind the other by doing these slices. Two more. There's MRIs. Now, MRIs are similar to CAT scans in that you get multiple layers. Here, though, this is using a strong magnetic field. It's realigning the protons basically in your tissues, and it's great for soft tissue. So if you have a soft tissue or any kind of issue with a joint, they may do an MRI. And extremely sharp. Old systems were rather claustrophobic. Now we're getting past that in a lot of them, but the bigger ones aren't as good, so there's a trade-up. But still, MRIs give incredible images. And the last one I want to mention are PET scans. So this is positron emission tomography. PET scans use basically radioactive molecules. And the one I'll talk about right now is radioactive glucose. So glucose, sugar, taken up by all the living cells in your body. Right? It's great sugar, good energy source. And if I inject some radioactive glucose into you, all the cells of your body will take up some of that glucose, but the cells that are growing really super fast will take up even more of the glucose. So tumors, which are cells growing out of control too fast, will take up more of this radioactive glucose. So it's possible with computer enhancement to see this hotspot. So this hotspot is showing likely a tumor of some sort in this tissue. There's uptake of this radioactive glucose. Now, not only can PET scans be used to show overactive tissues, they can also be used to show dead tissue. So if someone has a stroke, they have damage to the brain, or they've had an MI, a heart attack, and there's a part of a heart that's no longer viable, it's damaged, those tissues would not take up glucose, right? So there'd be, quote, a cold spot, a blue spot on the image. So hot spots for overactive tissues or a cold spot for dead tissues, think stroke or heart attack. The PET scan can be used. So that's the end of chapter 1. I will start with chapter 2 next time. I'll post this lecture right now if you want to review it. Those who are listening at home in hybrid can be reviewing this. I think that's about it. If you're not in mastering, please get enrolled. I didn't show that to you right now. I should have. But go on to mastering. There are some assignments there. I showed my lab group. I'll show the lab group tonight. I'll show you again on Wednesday. But if you're not enrolled in mastering, come see me so we can solve those problems. You don't want to get behind. You definitely want to get enrolled in that as soon as possible.